a metallic click, an ejected cartridge, and the fate of an entire war changed forever. In the early 1930s, the world was silently marching toward a new conflict. The bloody lessons of World War I still echoed across the devastated fields of Europe. Soldiers had learned a cruel truth. In modern warfare, firepower meant survival. The bolt-action rifles that filled the trenches were reliable, yes, but painfully slow. Every shot required a deliberate motion. Pull the bolt back, eject the spent casing, push a new round into the chamber, lock it, aim, fire. In those critical seconds, the enemy advanced. Men died waiting to shoot again. The United States military understood this fatal weakness. While other nations clung to their traditional weapons, American strategists envisioned something revolutionary: a semi-automatic rifle that could fire as fast as a soldier could pull the trigger. No manual cycling. No wasted movements. Just raw, continuous firepower in the hands of every infantryman. Enter John Cantius Garand, a quiet Canadian-born engineer working at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. Garand was not a soldier. He was not a general. He was a designer obsessed with mechanical perfection. For years he had labored in relative obscurity, sketching, testing, failing, and redesigning. His workshop was filled with prototypes, springs, gas tubes, and rejected blueprints. The U.S. military had issued a challenge: create a semi-automatic rifle that could withstand the brutality of combat, function in any climate, and be simple enough for mass production. By 1936, after countless iterations and field trials, Garand's design was finally adopted. The M1 Garand was born. It was chambered in .30-06 Springfield, a powerful round capable of stopping an enemy at considerable distance. But its true innovation lay in its gas-operated system. When a round was fired, a portion of the expanding gases was redirected through a small port near the muzzle, driving a piston that automatically ejected the spent casing and loaded the next round. The shooter never had to break his aim. The rifle did the work. It weighed nearly 10 pounds fully loaded, with an 8-round en bloc clip that slid into the receiver from the top. When the last round was fired, the clip ejected with a distinctive ping, a sound that would become legendary. Some would later claim that sound was a tactical disadvantage, alerting enemies that a soldier was reloading. But those who carried the Garand knew better. In the chaos of battle, that ping was drowned out by explosions, screams, and the roar of machine guns. The M1 Garand was not just a weapon, it was a statement. For the first time in history, an entire army would be equipped with semi-automatic rifles as standard issue. Not just specialist units, not just elite forces, every rifleman. Every Marine, every soldier storming a beach or clearing a forest would have the firepower of 2 or 3 bolt-action riflemen combined. But in 1936, the world did not yet understand what this meant. The rifles sat in armories, waiting. Testing continued. Production ramped up slowly. And across the Atlantic, storm clouds gathered. Adolf Hitler's Germany was rearming. Imperial Japan was expanding. The Soviet Union was building its war machine. The stage was set for the deadliest conflict in human history, and the M1 Garand was about to prove its worth in blood and fire. By the time the United States entered World War II in December 1941, the M1 Garand was still relatively new. Many soldiers trained with it, but few had fired it in combat. The older Springfield bolt-action rifles still lingered in some units, but as American forces deployed to the Pacific and Europe, the Garand began to show its true power. The first major test came in the jungles of Guadalcanal in 1942. American Marines stormed ashore into a nightmare of heat, disease, and fanatical resistance. Japanese soldiers, armed with bolt-action Arisaka rifles, fought with terrifying determination. But in close-quarters jungle fighting, the M1 Garand proved devastating. Marines could fire 8 rounds in rapid succession without breaking cover, suppressing enemy positions while advancing. The psychological impact was immense. Japanese troops, trained to rush American lines during reloads, suddenly found themselves facing continuous fire. According to battlefield reports, Survivors described the sound of Garand fire as relentless, a hammering rhythm that never seemed to stop. Where a bolt-action rifleman might fire 10 aimed shots per minute, a trained Garand operator could fire 30 or more. The math was simple and brutal. American squads could generate 2 to 3 times the firepower of their equivalents in any other army. General George S. Patton would later call the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. This was not hyperbole. Patton had seen every major American rifle since World War I. He understood firepower, he understood mobility, and he understood that wars were won by the side that could put more bullets down range, faster, and more accurately. In North Africa, American infantrymen faced the legendary Afrika Korps. In Italy, they fought their way up mountains against entrenched German defenders. In France, they stormed the beaches of Normandy. In every theater, the M1 Garand was there. Its reliability became legendary. It functioned in the freezing cold of the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge. It worked in the scorching deserts of Tunisia. It fired through mud, rain, sand, and snow. Soldiers learned to trust it with their lives. They gave it nicknames. They cleaned it obsessively. They slept with it beside them. Because in combat, the Garand was more than a tool. It was a lifeline. But the rifle was not perfect. The en-bloc clip system, while ingenious, had limitations. Once a clip was inserted, it could not be topped off. If a soldier fired 3 rounds and wanted to reload, he had to eject the partially spent clip, wasting 5 rounds. In sustained firefights, this could be a problem. Additionally, the rifle's length, over 43 inches, made it cumbersome in tight spaces like bunkers or urban buildings. Yet these were minor flaws in an otherwise revolutionary design. The M1 Garand had achieved what many thought impossible. It had given ordinary soldiers the firepower of elite troops. It had leveled the battlefield. It had changed the fundamental calculus of infantry combat. And the war was far from over. The Pacific theater was a different kind of hell. While European battlefields offered open fields and strategic depth, the islands of the Pacific presented a claustrophobic nightmare. Dense jungles, volcanic rock, caves carved deep into mountains. Every island was a fortress, defended by Japanese soldiers who had sworn never to surrender. The M1 Garand would face its most brutal test here, in battles whose names would echo through history. Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. On the black volcanic sands of Iwo Jima in February 1945, Marines stormed ashore under withering fire. Japanese machine guns, mortars, and artillery turned the beach into a killing field. Men fell within seconds of leaving their landing craft. The survivors pressed forward, crawling over bodies, dragging wounded comrades, returning fire with their Garands. The rifle's semi-automatic capability became the difference between life and death. A Marine could spot a muzzle flash from a hidden bunker, snap off 8 rapid shots to suppress it, and advance before the enemy could react. Witnesses recall the sound, not individual shots, but a continuous roar of American firepower rolling across the island like thunder. Japanese defenders, armed with bolt-action rifles, found themselves outgunned at every turn. Even their superior defensive positions couldn't compensate for the sheer volume of fire that American infantry could generate. When Japanese soldiers attempted their signature banzai charges, mass frontal assaults designed to overwhelm enemy positions, they ran headlong into a wall of Garand fire that cut them down in waves. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. Japanese military doctrine had been built around the assumption of rough parity in infantry weapons. Their training emphasized close-quarters combat, where courage and Bushido spirit could overcome firepower. But the M1 Garand had broken that equation. American soldiers, many of them farm boys and factory workers with minimal combat experience, could hold their ground against veteran enemy troops simply because they could shoot faster. In the European theater, the final push into Germany revealed another dimension of the Garand's superiority. As Allied forces crossed the Rhine and drove deep into the Third Reich, they encountered German troops armed with an eclectic mix of weapons. While the Germans had developed some semi-automatic rifles like the Gewehr 43, these were never produced in sufficient numbers. The vast majority of Wehrmacht infantry still carried the Karabiner 98K, an excellent bolt-action rifle, but fundamentally a weapon from an earlier era. American GIs advancing through German towns and forests had a decisive advantage. In house-to-house fighting, where engagements happened at ranges of 10 to 50 meters, the ability to fire rapidly without manual reloading was decisive. A single American soldier with a Garand could clear a room faster and more effectively than two Germans with bolt actions. This wasn't just about firepower, it was about speed, momentum, and the psychological edge of knowing you wouldn't be caught reloading at the wrong moment. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 tested the M1 Garand in the worst possible conditions. German forces launched a massive surprise counteroffensive through the Ardennes forest, creating chaos among American units. Temperatures plummeted below zero. Snow fell continuously. Weapons froze. Men froze. In these conditions, the Garand's reliability became legendary. While other weapons jammed or malfunctioned in the extreme cold, the M1 continued to fire. Soldiers learned to keep their rifles under their coats when possible, using body heat to prevent the metal from freezing. When they couldn't, they simply cleared the ice and kept fighting. One particular account from a company commander near Bastogne describes a night attack where German infantry attempted to overrun American positions under cover of darkness. The Americans, outnumbered and low on ammunition, held their fire until the enemy was within 50 meters. Then, on command, they opened up with their Garands. The sudden eruption of semi-automatic fire, dozens of rifles firing as fast as their operators could pull the trigger, shattered the German assault. Enemy soldiers, expecting the slower rate of fire from bolt-action rifles, were caught completely off guard. The attack collapsed within minutes. But victory came at a terrible price. The M1 Garand had helped win battles, but it couldn't erase the horror of war. Every soldier who carried one had stories of friends who died beside them. The rifle was just a tool, an extraordinarily effective tool, but still just metal and wood. It didn't make men invincible. It didn't stop bullets. It didn't prevent fear or grief or the soul-crushing weight of taking another human life. When World War II finally ended in August 1945, over 4 million M1 Garands had been produced. The rifle had served in every major campaign, from North Africa to the Philippines. It had been carried by paratroopers, Marines, Army infantry, and even some Navy personnel. It had become the symbol of American military power, practical, reliable, and devastatingly effective. But the M1 Garand's story didn't end with VJ Day. Less than 5 years after World War II ended, American soldiers were again in combat, this time on the Korean Peninsula. When North Korean forces invaded South Korea in June 1950, the United States responded with troops who still carried the M1 Garand. The rifle proved just as effective in the mountains and valleys of Korea as it had in Europe and the Pacific. Korean War veterans describe firefights in the brutal winter of 1950-51, when Chinese forces poured across the border and American units fought desperate rearguard actions. Once again, the Garand's reliability in extreme cold saved lives. At the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, surrounded Marines used their M1s to hold off wave after wave of Chinese infantry. The rifle that had defeated Imperial Japan now held the line against Communist China. However, warfare was evolving. The Korean War introduced new challenges that exposed some of the M1's limitations. The rise of submachine guns and early assault rifles like the Soviet PPSH-41 and the German STG-44, now in Chinese hands, showed that the future of infantry combat lay in selective fire weapons, rifles capable of both semi-automatic and fully automatic fire. The M1 Garand, for all its revolutionary design, was still fundamentally a semi-automatic rifle. It couldn't provide the sustained automatic fire that modern infantry tactics increasingly demanded. By the mid-1950s, military planners were already looking toward the next generation. The M14 rifle, adopted in 1957, was essentially an improved M1 Garand with a detachable 20-round magazine and selective fire capability. It retained the same .30-06 cartridge, later changed to 7.62 mm NATO, and gas-operated system, but added the features that modern warfare required. The M1 Garand was gradually phased out of frontline service. Yet the rifle's influence extended far beyond American military service. After World War II, millions of surplus M1 Garands were distributed to allied nations around the world. Greece, Turkey, Japan, South Korea, and numerous Latin American countries received Garands through military aid programs. Some of these rifles are still in service today, 70 years after their manufacture, a testament to the robustness of Garand's design. The rifle also became a symbol in American culture. Veterans returning from World War II brought stories of the weapon that had kept them alive. The distinctive ping of the ejecting clip became instantly recognizable. Movies, television shows, and later video games featured the M1 Garand prominently. It became shorthand for American military power during what many consider the nation's finest hour. Collectors and historians prize original M1 Garands. Well-preserved examples sell for thousands of dollars. The Civilian Marksmanship Program, a federally chartered organization, still sells refurbished M1 Garands to qualified civilians, allowing new generations to experience the rifle that changed warfare. Shooting competitions specifically for M1 Garands attract thousands of participants annually. But beneath the nostalgia and historical significance lies a darker truth. The M1 Garand was designed for one purpose: to kill efficiently. Every innovation, the gas-operated system, the semi-automatic action, the powerful .30-06 cartridge, was meant to help one human being end the life of another. The rifle didn't create war, but it made war more lethal. It gave soldiers the ability to kill faster and more effectively than ever before. John Garand, the quiet engineer who created this revolutionary weapon, lived until 1974. He saw his rifle serve in 3 wars. He witnessed its impact on military doctrine and infantry tactics worldwide. In interviews, he spoke modestly about his creation, emphasizing its mechanical elegance rather than its battlefield effectiveness. He received relatively little recognition during his lifetime. No royalties, no grand honors. The U.S. military owned the patents, and Garand was simply an employee of the Springfield Armory. There's a profound irony in this. The man who created perhaps the most influential infantry weapon of the 20th century remained obscure, while generals and politicians claimed the glory of victory. Garand never fired his rifle in combat. He never stormed a beach or cleared a bunker. But his work killed more enemy soldiers than many entire divisions. The M1 Garand represents a turning point in military technology, the moment when individual firepower became truly democratic. Before Garand, elite troops with specialized weapons had advantages that ordinary soldiers couldn't match. After the M1, every infantryman possessed devastating firepower. This democratization of lethality changed warfare fundamentally. It made mass infantry assaults suicidal. It forced tactical evolution. It contributed to the doctrine of fire and maneuver that defines modern infantry combat. General Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised, but perhaps a more fitting epitaph comes from the soldiers who carried it. They called it reliable. They called it accurate. They called it the reason they came home alive. For them, the M1 Garand wasn't a historic artifact or a revolutionary design. It was the tool that stood between them and death. Today, more than 80 years after its adoption, the M1 Garand's influence remains visible in nearly every military rifle in service. The gas-operated system Garand perfected is still the dominant mechanism for semi-automatic and automatic rifles. The emphasis on reliability, accuracy, and ease of use that guided his design process became the standard by which all military weapons are judged. But walk through any American military cemetery, Arlington, Normandy, Manila, Pusan, and you'll find the true legacy of the M1 Garand. Thousands upon thousands of white crosses and stars of David mark the graves of men who carried that rifle. Some died despite its advantages. Some died while it jammed at the worst possible moment. Some died having never fired a shot, cut down before they could unsling their rifles. The M1 Garand helped win World War II, helped preserve democracy, helped defeat fascism and militarism. These are not small achievements, but it's worth remembering that every battlefield success, every tactical advantage, every engagement won was bought with human lives. The rifle made American soldiers more effective. It did not make them invincible. It did not make war clean or honorable, or anything other than the horror it has always been. A metallic click, an ejected cartridge, and the fate of an entire war changed forever. But the cost, the terrible, irredeemable cost, was paid in blood by men whose names we've mostly forgotten, whose faces we'll never see, whose last thoughts went unrecorded as they fell on distant battlefields with a rifle beside them that couldn't save them in the end.